So welcome everyone to the Institute of Risk Management, Module 5, Risk Governance and Culture, revision webinar on Tuesday, the 3rd of November 2020. So today we're going to look at our study journey. And firstly, we're going to reflect on Unit 1, Corporate Governance, Risk Oversight, Internal Control and Assurance. Okay, so this unit focuses on explaining corporate governance and international variations. It's important with this part of the module that you understand the definition of corporate governance. That is, of course, the mechanism of which organisations are managed and controlled. We also want to look at explaining who has enterprise risk management oversight. So that is fundamentally the board. And there's also a focus on how risk and audit support and how, when risk and audit work together, there are synergies around that, which mean that we can ensure that we're effective in the way that we're managing risk. We want to focus on using the risk profile as a tool and how discussions through the risk profile on risk appetite are extremely important, and how, as the risk manager, you're informing the board in respect of what they should or shouldn't be doing. We would also focus on explaining internal control and how that contributes towards the achievement of objectives, and we would want to focus in our answers on the use of frameworks. So we would perhaps want to talk about COSO as an internal control model, but really through Unit 1 and when we look at the exam, we want to explain how all of the elements of risk management come together. We want to look at how the risk profile, the internal control models, the risk management framework all work together and harmonise and ensure that everything that we're doing is making the business effective and efficient. We also want to explain how compliance helps the business gain benefits and how that is of absolute importance. So all things from Unit 1, which is quite a big unit in the module, that are extremely important and will help you with your exam and the question about really explaining how risk management benefits the organisation. Okay. We moved on to Unit 2. So Unit 2 covers strategic planning and risk management. So within this unit, what we looked at was revisiting Fraser and Simpkins' 10 recommended practices. So if you have another look at those, if you go back to your reading, it's about value added. This is how risk management adds value to the organisation. So some of the elements of the 10 recommended practices are about risk becoming a common language, so that people in the organisation talk about risk in the same way, understand each other, so that the language really becomes a tool. And also how incorporating risk assessments into strategic planning is extremely effective, and how that should be part of the strategic planning process. It's also about strategic risk management being very much a continuous process. So we want to ensure that risk management isn't something that's added on, it's something that's an absolute fundamental in the way that the business works. Okay, so another area that I think that it would be good for you to revisit around Unit 2 in advance of the exam is to look at Steinberg's 5 conclusions on enterprise risk management. So one of those is managing risk more and assessing risk less, so very much having a balance around that, something that I try to do in my job every day. I think that's extremely important. Also the whole thing again about enterprise risk management being absolutely embedded and part of the way that the organisation operates and thinks. And also it's about integrating risk management within the management processes. So how can we make sure that that's done? How can we make sure that it's very much, again, the way that the business is operating and managing risk effectively? We would also want to concentrate on establishing clear responsibilities and communication channels. So if you want to think back to the risk management process and the importance of risk communication and learning, again, something good to include in your exam answers. Steinberg refers to risk management as being core, not separate, and exactly how business is done. I think in terms of Unit 2, it's a good idea to revisit effective risk architecture in an organisation and how this should be set up to be effective, and also how risk and audit harmonise. So if you reflect back to the reading within Hopkin and look again at risk architecture, so really going back to the start of your study journey with the IRM, but looking at how an effective risk and audit function can really bring around business benefits, and again, being part of the strategic planning process. Another important element of Unit 2 is about the role of the Chief Risk Officer. So Fraser and Simpkins, they talk about the CRO as being the strategic controller and the conscience of the business. So very much about the role and how you operate as the risk manager, how you work with the board, and what are the expectations of you within the role to ensure that you are being effective as a risk manager. Okay. So we moved on and we looked at Unit 3. So Unit 3 covers risk culture, business ethics, and organisational behaviour. So within this unit, what we would want to be able to do for the exam is be able to explain how to diagnose a risk culture and the fundamental importance of this. As Professor Drucker says, culture eats strategy for breakfast, so something that is everything in an organisation, isn't it? It's about the effectiveness of the business. So the reading provides details on different models to analyse risk culture, and you'll know that the IRM have some very good guidance also on risk culture. So really it's about knowing and understanding the models and understanding the guidance. So you may want to reflect again on the IRM risk culture aspects model. Just go back to that and think about how, as the risk manager, you would be using that in your organisation at the end of the day to ensure that the business is effective. I think that when you're doing the exam and you're thinking about this area of the module, it's important to focus on businesses that have not managed their business ethics well, and to give the reasons behind that, but also to look at businesses that have been very successful, businesses that either manage their ethics well anyway, or businesses who may have had issues and through effective risk management have actually recovered from that. So you'll see in the workbook there are good examples, and I'm absolutely sure that from your own knowledge you'll have examples from your own background and study as well. One of the things that this module also focuses on is really about explaining the importance of tone from the top. So how important is it that the board exhibit the right behaviours? How do we ensure that their behaviours feed into how the whole of the organisation behaves and that those are right? So you may wish to go back and look at Steinberg again and cover that just to refresh your knowledge on it. Within this unit, we also looked at explaining and recognising the importance of international risk culture. So certainly an area that you would want to focus on. You would want to be able to explain the different types of behaviours of different cultures and how, as the risk manager, you would have an awareness of this, and again you would be able to assess and manage and support the board in their work. Okay, so we then moved on to Unit 4, and Unit 4 concentrates on risk perception. So again, an absolutely important part of the risk manager's role and a very important part of this module. So I would suggest that if you haven't done so already, it's a good idea to go back and revisit Murray, Webster and Hilson and look at the risk attitudes. So as we know, those are being risk averse, risk tolerant, risk seeking and risk neutral, and be able to describe those different behaviours and give examples in respect of that. I also think that when you're reflecting back on Unit 4 in terms of your exam revision, it's a good idea to revisit the Yadowski paper and again look at the different cognitive biases that people may have. Some of those, for example, we looked at availability. So judging the frequency of the event by availability, by the proximity to the risk, and as the risk manager again being able to recognise and call that out. Also around looking at overconfidence and the importance of not being overconfident. You probably have good examples, for example, of optimism bias and where this can lead to issues particularly around project management and managing risks in projects. I think bystander apathy is an interesting one as well, where the larger the amount of people present, the less likely anyone will do anything. We also have scope neglect. So again, a good idea, I think, to reflect back on that and to be able in the exam to reference your reading and to give examples of what you know too. So the other area of Unit 4 that I think it's important to focus on is reflecting again on risk attitude, and again that's going back to the Murray, Webster and Hilson reading, and this is really about managing group risk attitude. So Murray, Webster and Hilson talk about having awareness of self and others, appreciation of self and others, assessment and whether the intervention is required by the risk manager, and also assertion of needs and issues. And there's a focus on the action to achieve goals and acceptance of risk attitude. So I think that it's a good idea to go back again and have a look at some of the main elements of Unit 4 and just relate that to your own knowledge, experience and further reading that you'll have been doing for the module. So we also looked at Unit 5. So Unit 5 is about risk management and performance. So what we want to do is be able to summarise the process by which risk management performance can be monitored and also continually improved. We also want to explain how risk management may improve organisational performance and value. We also want to ensure that the board ensures risk management contributes to the performance and value of the organisation. And Professor Drucker, what is not measured is not managed, so very much about being able to have that measurability. I think it's a good idea at this point to go back to the reading in Chapman again, who focuses on the risk management process. So he has there's a strong reflection there on executing the risk responses, ensuring that we maintain risk management effectiveness, and looking at controlling and intervening if things are not going to plan. Reflecting again on another of one of the quotes, which I think is very good, George Bernard Shaw, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that has taken place. So really again about reflection, how is risk management working within the organisation, how effective is it, how understood is it to ensure that you're achieving the objectives at the end of the day that risk management has to achieve as, what are the goals. I think also for Unit 5, it's a good idea to look back at Chapman again and to look at the importance of key risk indicators in the strategic management process. So we would want to ensure that we have key risk indicators, for example, as well as key performance indicators, and that there's a synergy between the information, and that we can ensure that we are using that to ensure that the business have the information that they need to make decisions. So we would want to be able to use the key risk indicators and the key performance indicators in tandem with each other. So there are other areas of benchmarking that we may want to look at. So as you know, I work in the public sector for a local authority. So ALARM, which is the Association of Local Authority Risk Managers, undertakes public sector benchmarking. So again, that's looking at comparators and exactly how effective the processes are. So just going to move on to Unit 6, the last unit on the module. So Unit 6 really focuses on reputation. So extremely important part of the module again, as all the units are. So this is really about understanding the sources and impact of risks that have reputational value. So it's about the board and absolutely understanding that, having regular discussions on that, and also understanding the drivers of reputation risk and how to manage risk. I think it's really about how can reputation risk management be integral to the governance and management of the organisation. So again, how can it be embedded? How can we ensure that we're really thinking about our reputation risks with all of our risks and all of our objectives? There's good information that you'll have come across, and it's through the Reputation Institute. So really focusing there on what companies manage reputation well. Be good to give examples of that in the exam. What can be learned from these? Good practice, how can we ensure that in the organisations that we work in, this is something that we're very much doing. We would also want to concentrate on the term goodwill in respect of reputation. So I think that's an important part of your understanding for the exam too. So how important is goodwill in an organisation? And also, if you could reflect back on Deloitte's drivers of reputation risk, those are good things to include in your exam answer too. So focusing on security, physical or cyber, focusing as well on ethics, so concentrating on fraud, bribery and corruption. Looking again at products, so you'll know there's lots of examples of poor risk management and reputational damage when it has came to product, services and safety. So I'm sure there's lots of examples there that you could include in your exam answer. And also, last but not least, the Honey book is extremely valuable and really focuses on how reputation risk should be at the heart of every risk register, and really focuses on how to qualify. So it's good to reflect back again on the Honey book and look at the 7 risk drivers. So I would go back and I would have a look at that. Okay. So in summary, that has really been our study journey, and I think just some things that it's good to reflect back on. Obviously, right up until the exam, we will still be doing the LinkedIn updates, and there'll be there'll be more things that we'll have another look at and revisit, but I think those are just some key elements that you can consider. Okay, so just thinking about the exam revision. So thinking about exam techniques, obviously your exam is going to be a bit different because it's on Moodle. You may have done that previously last year, or you may not. So very much about when you are doing your exam, ensuring that you have a comfortable space to work from, ensuring that you're set up for the duration of the exam and that you feel comfortable in that environment. Again, really about practicing on papers. There's such a wealth of information available within the study. There's the past papers in there, as well as the examiners. Really useful. I think it's really good to reflect on the examiner's report and to look at where students may have gone wrong previously, to ensure, you know, that those pitfalls are avoided. I think that in terms of the exam and the case study, which is really different to other IRM exams that you've done, what I would say is make sure that you read it a couple of times really carefully. I know that when I was doing my exam, I think I maybe even read it 3 times. So it's really about giving yourself time within the exam to do that, and really focusing on what is the exam question asking you to do. So not only reading the case study, but reading the exam questions quite a few times too. But I know that you all know that because you're really at the end of your study now, but these were certainly things that I was thinking about when I was studying. It's extremely important to cite your reading reference and to ensure that that information is absolutely correct. So make sure, obviously, that you have the authors' names right. Make sure that you know, there aren't any details missing or anything. You want to ensure that you're really clear about your referencing. Because this module, the diploma, is at graduate level, it's really the whole thing about being able to evidence your critical thinking, being able to consider all of your knowledge, everything that you've learned through your essential and your additional reading, and being able to absolutely apply that, and being able to make arguments through your knowledge as well, and to be able to evidence and to be able to explain yourself in the exam. You would also want to use and explain the definitions in your answers. So again, thinking back to the start of our session today, really about what do we, you know, how can we use the definitions to gain marks? The definitions should be memorised. Really, I think that's a good thing to do, because then you're going to be able to automatically put that information into your exam answer. I know that when I was studying, I tended to make a lot of notes on my iPhone, and particularly in terms of the definitions, I would read them and read them and read them until they were memorised. Okay, so we've talked quite a bit about essential reading. So through the weekly updates on the LinkedIn page, we've really looked at what the essential reading is, what you need to look at, linking the content of the module back to real life examples, and thinking about further reading as well. So your further reading and your experience as well is really important, I think, when you're doing the whole thing about explaining your answers. So certainly good to ensure that you do that in the exam. You can provide that evidence and really show everything that you've learned, you know, show how knowledgeable you are on risk through everything that you've been studying in the module, and you know, through your study journey so far, even from the certificate. So again, just to recap on this, case study questions, read them carefully. I think in the exam, almost think of yourself as the risk manager within the organisation and the risk methodologies that you would implement to manage risk effectively. Providing reference to your reading, making sure that you have that in-depth analysis and evaluation, ensuring that you reference your wider reading. You might want to include information where relevant of current affairs. You want to provide definitions, as I said, to evidence your knowledge. Remember to always link your answers to the study. So continue to reflect on the case study and you know exactly what you would do as a risk manager to improve. You want to evidence your understanding of best practice. So that's particularly important when you think about the audit standard, the IIA. So these are key areas of study that you would want to link back into your answer. You want to link the theory, I would say, to the risk management process and responsibilities. So finally, on this, I think it's about, again, showing your critical thinking and absolute knowledge that you've gained over the last period of study that you've had. Okay, so in terms of Moodle, there will be an IRM tutorial webinar which will take you through the use of Moodle so that you can be organised around that in advance of the exam. As I said, some of you may have used it previously, but some of you might not have, so that will be helpful in terms of what you have to do. And also there's information on the November 2020 exams, and that's in a Word document, again, relating to Moodle. Okay. So I don't know if any of you have any questions from today's webinar. It's been helpful. You know that I'm available through the LinkedIn forum. If there's absolutely anything at all that you want to or the content of the module or any things that you're not sure about, then please just let me know. I'm here to help. And I want to say thank you for your time today. Thank you for your input with the LinkedIn forum. And last but not least, I want to wish you all the very best success for the exam. Okay, so we'll just finish for today. So thank you everyone for your time.